Welcome to Mystery in Minutes. Let's take a trip to the cosmos with the evolutionary 2018 film The Titan by Leonard Ruff. The movie begins with opening credits showcasing the sea's tide, entrancing the audience as the camera glides from the beach to the heavy terrain vehicles whizzing by on the highway. The protagonist, Rick Jansen, sits in one of these cars with his sleeping wife and son, glancing through the news on his tab about nuclear fallout that fuels sandstorms, resulting in Southern California's evacuation by the National Guard. The federal government is struggling to cope with more terrains all over the world, including Los Angeles, becoming uninhabitable. The film's plot takes place in 2048 at the NATO Operations Basis, Atlantic, where Dr. Freya, a doctor in a lab coat with a short bob, awaits Rick's arrival with his family. She joins them in the car and informs Rick that the facility is a 4 square mile space with a working population of 3,000 people and includes 20,000 acres of training fields. The major accompanying Rick tells him that the classified mission is a joint initiative with NATO and the Defense Science Office and the British Department of Science and Technology, offering limited contact with the outside world. Dr. Freya shows them around and later leaves them to settle in their new home. As she unpacks, Abby takes off her medical researcher certificate, revealing herself to be a doctor. After the family spends quality time blissfully unaware of what the future holds for them, Professor Collingwood, the mastermind behind the scientific operation, arrives and warns Rick of the potential risks of the experiment he has agreed to be a part of. But Rick is determined to proceed with it. After the meeting, Collingwood cautions Abby of the after effects Rick might have to endure, but she believes in him, having read his work and considering it a small price to pay for their son's future. She drops off the professor in his car, unaware of what her family has signed up for. In the next scene, the professor presents a distressing video depicting the dire state of Earth, with an overpopulated, decaying environment, depleted resources, and ongoing wars for the remaining scraps. He predicts that within a decade, much of the planet will be uninhabitable, and within 15 years, half of the population will starve to death. As time runs out, he proposes Titan, Saturn's largest moon, as the only viable alternative despite its inhospitable conditions. Titan's primordial ecosystem and similar atmosphere to Earth offers some hope, but its waters contain liquid methane, and its air has high nitrogen levels, rendering it inhospitable to humans unless they evolve. The professor's plan involves evolving humans for space travel to survive on Titan, rather than attempting to reshape planets to accommodate people. Dr. Hernandez questions the feasibility of forced evolution, but Collington cites the success of his clinical trials. We learn that Rick and the other participants, chosen for their ability to endure harsh conditions and their willingness to prioritize the needs of others, have volunteered to undergo a series of tests to mutate their DNA for Titan's harsh environment. After the participants banter with one another, Rick undergoes a series of injections, genetically altering his DNA to adapt to Titan's low-oxygen atmosphere. The following day, Rick and his family host a barbecue for the other participants, sharing the story of their college romance. After the party, Abby helps Rick to bed, as he suffers from an after effect of the clinical trial. As time passes, the Titan Project subjects Rick and other participants to an arduous barrage of physical and mental stressors, including extreme temperatures and G-forces. The experiment involves modifying Rick's DNA with animal genes, the goal of enabling him to survive and breathe in the harsh environment of Saturn's moon, Titan. The experiment progresses, and Rick's abilities continue to evolve. Rick responds positively, developing the capability to swim at remarkable speeds and hold his breath underwater for an extraordinary 42 minutes, surpassing other members. His family life flourishes, and he shares an intimate moment with Abby, who notices his bulging veins yet ignores it. The following day, tubes protrude from Rick's mouth as Abby and Lucas bond with their neighbors, Rayanne and her children. Rayanne voices her concerns regarding the experiment, but Abby reassures her. When Rick is wheeled in from the medical facility, Abby's confidence wavers after observing anomalies in his results. One night, she awakens shivering in an empty bed and searches for Rick. Increasing the temperature, she discovers him sitting in the kitchen applying ice to himself, no longer feeling cold, and ecstatic about the transformation. The following morning, Rick and Abby go for a jog together and he takes her to a scenic spot atop a hill. Dr. Freya is instructed by the professor to be careful when working with 20% methane to intensify the training. Rick helps Tally, a fellow member, to train better by focusing on her mind over matter. Rick begins to experience side effects, such as hair loss, and witnesses a female member convulsing and dying in the bathroom with Dr. Freya unable to help. At home, Rick and the other members discuss the possibility of their deaths, but Rick remains determined to continue for the sake of his son's future. He breaks protocol to share a drink with a fellow member as a means to cope. Tally's husband speaks to Abby and leaves as Tally joins them in the kitchen, speaking about his desire for a good wife upon her return from Titan, admitting she wouldn't have made it this far in the experiment without Rick's help. During dinner, Abby observes the test subject's blood veins becoming darker, indicating further genetic alteration, but her thoughts are interrupted when Zane attacks his wife. Rick rushes over to stop him while Abby confronts a sobbing Ryan. Dr. Rhea comes over to check on Rick, administering him medication that Abby is skeptical about. She tends to Rick taking swabs of his vomit to test later and notices the cameras installed in the house. Meanwhile, Rick is sitting at the bottom of the pool, shedding large amounts of skin. Abby grows increasingly concerned for Rick as she notices his side effects, including blue, thickened blood that seems to be alive. To adapt to the low light on Titan, Rick is urged by Collingwood to undergo corneal surgery to change the aperture of his eyes. While bandaged and unable to see, Lucas assists Rick with daily tasks. However, complications arise at night and Abby rushes Rick, bleeding from his eyes, to the emergency room. Upset, she confronts Collingwood, informing him of Rick's symptoms and the cameras installed in her home. She accuses him of misleading the family, but he brushes off the incident as minor security measures and assures her of Rick's safety. As Dr. Freya looks on helplessly in the distance, Abby drives back home and packs a bag when the military arrives outside. She witnesses Zane, now a beastly figure, being shot down and killed by troops after killing his wife Rayanne. Abby steals Rick's keycard while visiting him in the medical facility and sneaks into Collingwood's office, avoiding military personnel. Meanwhile, Dr. Solano from NASA is furious about the deaths at the facility and wants to shut down the professor's operation, which he considers unproven science. In Collingwood's office, Abby discovers strange DNA sequencing and autopsy files on the deceased test subjects. She learns that the Titan experiment involves injecting animal DNA into human subjects to create a new species, Homo titanians. During the video call, Collingwood defies NASA's demands to shut down the experiment, with the major citing Pentagon's approval. Dr. Freya pleads with him to reconsider, but he insists on continuing the experiment. Collingwood then visits Rick to convince him that his vision would be restored after surgery, and that Zane's condition was an anomaly. However, Abby, having learned the truth about the experiment, is unwilling to let her husband become an animal. Collingwood confesses to injecting the members with animal DNA to create a new species, but emphasizes the need for surgery to save Rick's life. After Rick's successful surgery, he and Tally become the only survivors of the experiment and leave for their mission to Titan. Rick, still human in some ways, touches his wedding band with affection. Abby and Lucas, along with Tally's husband, witness the barely recognizable subjects and are fearful, but Rick communicates with them through the glass, and Collingwood hands over the wedding band, allowing Abby to take Rick home. While struggling to put on his clothes, Rick accidentally hits Abby in the face, causing her to fall to the ground. After trying to help her up, she becomes frightened and he sits down in disappointment. Later, Abby observes Rick's movements while he swims, impressed by his strength and agility. She then tucks Lucas in and turns on his star projector to help him sleep. Upon returning to Rick, Abby notices Tally approaching him by the pool with blood on her hands. It is then revealed that Tally has killed her own husband. The military arrive and shoot at Tally, and as they attempt to capture her, she takes down an officer before being gunned down herself. As the military try to capture the transformed Rick, he unleashes his fury on them, but stops in horror when Abby arrives with Lucas in her arms. Rick runs off in despair, and the colonel puts out an alert to find him, but is stopped in his pursuit by the Collington and the Major to no avail. Abby comforts Lucas as Dr. Freya's distress is evident. She leaves to locate Rick on a familiar hill they used to jog to, and the two reunite. However, their reunion is brief as the military intervenes and apprehends them both. Abigail awakens wounded to find Collingwood before her, asking for her help in sending Rick to Titan for his survival. Upon reaching Rick, she discovers him held in a glass container, in critical condition due to his evolution rendering him incompatible with Earth's atmosphere. The professor requests that Abigail convince Rick to receive a type of chemical lobotomy that will wipe out all of his memories, including those of her and their son, Lucas, to end his misery and allow him to survive. Silently agreeing, with Dr. Freya looking on hopelessly, she drops the vial of medicine on the ground and the Major helps her refill the syringe. Walking towards Rick, she enters the glass casing, lovingly placing her hand on his face before administering the drug. Afterwards, she asks Dr. Freya to depart with her, knowing what she has done. It is revealed that Abby had switched the medication for a harmless saline solution in a desperation attempt to save Rick, allowing him to escape by killing the Major who opened the glass case. Abby and Dr. Freya run through the lab towards another exit while the military pursues Rick. After their escape, the group finds a severely injured Rick, and Dr. Freya provides him with necessary medical attention. However, the military and the professor soon track them down, and Collingwood asks Abby to leave with Lucas, but she refuses. The professor commands the soldiers to fire at the unarmed group, but the colonel and his troops rebel against the orders and point their guns at him instead. The colonel, who had expressed vehement opposition to Collingwood's experiments, arrests him for treachery. Abby embraces Rick, who then reminisces about his happy family before being flown away, surviving the transformation. In Abigail's lab, where she and Dr. Freya lead the Titan II program with ethical research standards, Lucas invites her to view the stars in the clear night sky. Rick is shown on Titan, reaching the culmination of his metamorphosis and emerging as a brand new species, perfectly adapted to Titan's extreme conditions. The remarkable moment is captured on screen as Rick propels himself over a methane lake. Eager for more metamorphic videos? Leave your comments below and like, share, and subscribe for more.